Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we have a very special guest with us, Ernest Hendon, the last surviving victim of the Tuskegee syphilis study that occurred here in the U.S. from 1932 all the way up until 1972. We are so thankful to have Mr. Hendon with us today to discuss his personal experiences during this cruel and inhumane study. Mr. Hendon, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Mr. Osborne. It's my pleasure.
So, first off, for those who don't know you, could you give us a little background about yourself?
Well, of course. I was born in Macon County, Alabama in 1908. My father was a poor sharecropper, and I grew up living a relatively hard life. We didn't have much, but my parents did the best they could in our situation to make sure my siblings and I had the best life possible.
So, what was the medical situation like at the time before the study?
Well, doctors really weren't available in our area, especially not for us poor black sharecroppers. It's ironic because looking back, we were definitely the ones that needed it the most.
And why is that?
Although we didn't know it at the time, syphilis was rampant throughout our community. It was actually one of the worst areas in the South for syphilis.
So, do you remember the day when you were first introduced to the Tuskegee syphilis study?
I do. It was the summer of 1932, and I was taking a break from my work in the fields. A bus had arrived carrying doctors and nurses, hoping to do a study on all those infected with syphilis.
What motivated you to take part in the study? What was in it for you?
Well, they were pretty good at convincing. I got hot meals, medical checkups, transportation, and some other benefits. Oh, and they let us go to shop in town. Now that was impossible to turn down for a young black adult during that time. But
they were hiding something far worse, yes.
exactly. They weren't trying to help us at all. I had already started feeling badly. I mean, a lot of the black men during that time were, but the thing is, none of us knew why. And then the doctors came and said they could help us, that we had bad blood.
But that bad blood actually turned out to be syphilis, correct?
Yeah.
For all the viewers who are unfamiliar with syphilis, let me digress. Syphilis is a disease that is very common among African Americans. It's a systemic disease that is caused by spirochete bacteria. It is sexually transmitted, but can also be transmitted through contact and passed down from the mother to her fetus.
At the time, we didn't know anything about the details of syphilis, or even what syphilis was, but we were told that we could be helped. For me, I was given a pinkish medicine and another brown medicine that didn't do anything to help me feel better.
So the entire purpose of this study was completely focused on studying the effect of syphilis on black men?
Yes, and they didn't tell any of us about that. There were 600 of us total, all of us black and all of us men. We had been told that 399 of us were infected with syphilis and 201 were used as control. Of course, I was one of the infected ones.
Wow. It's crazy to know that this happened here in the U.S. just not that long ago. And this went on for so long without anyone doing anything.
The study was only supposed to last around half of a year, but somehow that turned into 40 long years.
Do you know what medical invention emerged during the 1940s?
Oh yes, that was one of the worst parts about everything that we went through. Penicillin was created only a few years after the study began, but the doctors and researchers failed to inform us of this and continued to study us. We could have been treated and cured for the syphilis, but blatant racism and lack of care made this impossible. It's really sad to know that all the men who died could have been saved.
I can't begin to imagine the pain you feel. More than 100 African American men perished during this study. It was a despicable set of actions that completely violated the government law that venereal diseases should always be cured if possible.
Yeah, and I can't say my anger towards this has gone away completely. It probably never will. Bill Clinton did make an official public apology to the victims of this study, but it will never make up for what was done.
I completely understand. At least you can find some condolence in the fact that the finding out of this study led to many important medical regulation changes and laws like the National Research Act. It stated that all human studies need to be reviewed by specialized review boards before they can proceed. A $10 million lawsuit was also filed against the federal government. Additionally, the Belmont Act was implemented that focused on three main principles: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. From there on, researchers need informed consent.
Yes, and luckily the study was exposed by the Washington Star. The study had actually been discovered previously by Peter Buxton out of San Francisco, who thought that it was unethical, but his superiors decided to let it continue. This is just another example of the injustice.
You really are a hero, Mr. Hendon. Thank you so much for letting us talk with you tonight. And that's all the time we have tonight. I'll see everyone next week.